Welcome to the Your Life Unfiltered podcast with your hosts, Kitul Kathari and Deepam Jain. In this podcast, we dig deep into the life experiences of our guests to connect the dots between their early experiences and what they're doing today. Today, we have a very special guest, Amish Shah. So Amish is an emergency doctor as well as a candidate for office. Amish, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you once again, both of you, for having me. As you said, I am an emergency physician. I work at the Mayo Clinic here in Arizona, and I've been practicing medicine 20 years. However, got into public service about 7 years ago, and I ran and I won for the Arizona House of Representatives. So I have won 3 elections, and I've been in office for 5 years now, and I have certainly learned a lot about how politics works. And now, after winning 3 elections, I've decided to jump into the race for United States Congress, and we're in the middle of that campaign right now.
Excellent. Mish, great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining. Before we talk about anything that you're doing today, let's go back a few years. Just walk us through your early childhood, early upbringings, right? So you obviously are an immigrant kid here, right? So how was growing up? I can imagine it's a few years ago, and you're definitely a little bit older than us, not too much. How were things? How were the experience back then, growing up? Are there any inclinations towards becoming a doctor at an early age, or just like servicing public? So just talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure. I was born and raised in Chicago. My parents are, of course, from India, right? My mom was born in Bombay. My dad was actually born in Gujarat, and our ancestors are all Gujarati on both sides, but he was actually raised in Kerala. And they came in 1968 or 69 to the U.S. to study. They were both engineering students and met in engineering school, and then got married, moved to Chicago. I was born there. So that's kind of my where I come from. I had an experience when I was 7 years old. My grandmother, my mom's mom, had come to Chicago because she was actually traveling through. A lot of our family was in Los Angeles, and she was going one way or another, I can't remember, to Mumbai, and she had a heart attack on her couch. And so they took her to the emergency department, and from my understanding, they had saved her life there, and they took care of her, and she was in the ICU. And I remember when I was 7 years old, my parents took me into the ICU, and I remember this sign in particular that said, "Nobody under 16 admitted." So I was, I don't know, a little scared or nervous that I shouldn't be in there. And so then I see her connected to lines and tubes and monitors, and I could not believe that somebody was responsible for all that and was keeping her alive, saving her life, and making that happen. And I just remember that having a profound impact on me from the time I was little. And I remember thinking to myself, I want to do that, right? Like, I want to be that kind of person who takes care of people.
Wow, thanks for sharing that. Yeah. So that clearly indicates, obviously that you really had an early inclination. So is that the first line of thinking, like as you kind of come of age, medicine is the first thing that you choose, or was there any, kind of getting into it? Moving along a little bit.
I mean, I like science, right? Like, so as I grew up, I started to focus a little bit on that, and biology in particular. And I said, wow, well, let's do this. My parents, of course, were very pleased, being good Indian or Jain parents, that wants to become a doctor. Oh my God! And so I got into the 7-year program at Northwestern. So it was a combined program, undergrad, med school. I finished, and at the end of it, the last year of med school, you have to go around, rotate, and choose. And during that time, particular inclination toward emergency medicine, a couple different things that are important there. First, we take all comers, which is what I like. There's a spirit of public service there, right? That doesn't matter who you are, whether you can pay, what you look like, what country you come from. We take care of everybody. Like my grandmother at the time was not a citizen, right? She was just visiting from India, and of course they took care of her. And so there's some part of that. The other thing is that you get to be with people at the time when they are the most in need of help, comfort, or somebody to reassure them that we're going to take care of you, right? These are difficult times for people. So being there for people is sometimes the most good physicians can do. Of course, we have the technical aspect of medicine. We really do save people's lives with the things we do, but that this is another part of it that I was particularly drawn to.
Okay, that's awesome. And then what about the foray into politics, right? So did you come up was it a thought process you had when you were very little that you also were interested in politics, or is that something you kind of grew into as you got deeper into the realm of medicine, and then maybe you had some experience that encouraged you to want to get into that? So what was that trigger that gave you that push to go into politics?
That's a great question. So the answer is not really. I didn't really have a real thought earlier on that I would be going in that direction. I had a great career. I have a great career, but I had done a lot of things within emergency medicine. So my first job out of residency, my residency was at this very rough and tumble place in the South Bronx. Then went across the East River to a place called Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan, and very academic, people from very elite schools and top-notch medicine. Through that, I was helping with the NFL. I worked for the New York Jets on the field as part of their emergency coverage. This was around the time when the concussion stuff was happening, so people wanted the absolute best care for the players. Did a little QA or research project for them, and it helped them sort of standardize emergency care across the league. So that was great. And they kind of said, go do a sports med fellowship. So I do this sports med fellowship at the University of Arizona. Enjoyed it. College football, Pac-12, and that was wonderful. And I don't know what it was. It just sort of after that didn't want to go back to sports med. Fell in love with Arizona and the weather and everything. So I did some independent practice out here for many years. And that was great. So I got to experience a lot of what it's like to practice medicine in various settings, and it's good. It's curious. You're learning about different ways. But I think that after all that, it started to dawn on me that even if I can save lives one at a time, or I can control what happens within the four walls of the emergency department, you can't control what comes in through the front door, right? But who determines that? Politicians. Public policy. It is the system that we live in that really affects a lot of outcomes. So at some point you start thinking to yourself, what can I do to make this better, right? And the healthcare system here in this country, I have some issues with. Very, very expensive. Leaves some people out in the cold. We still have a lot of personal bankruptcies. People find it to be a hassle to deal with the healthcare system itself, especially when they're sick. So you start seeing these things and wondering, why are we doing these things this way when other countries do things a little bit better in many of these regards? So I had been doing, up until that time, some charity work, public service work. I worked on animal charities, of course, being a good Jane guy, right? And so I always worked for animal protection, and had actually founded the first ever Arizona Vegetarian Food Festival here in town in Scottsdale. That ended up yielding a lot of benefit for people that was outside of medical practice. And I thought that was, wow, that was really cool. People stop me and say, hey, you're Dr. Shah, you founded that festival. We loved it. You saved my life. I am now, my cholesterol is better, and this, that. So this was great. It was nice to see the impact of all of the work I was doing, also children's charities. So you get into this mindset and you start asking yourself, well, how can I make a bigger difference? So one day I had Googled nearest political meeting in Scottsdale, and it came up, and I just showed up at the meeting, and that was it. So the average age in the room, I think, was about 80 years old. And it was like a lunch brunch kind of situation at a golf club. And I walked in, and the lady said, who are you? I said, my name is Amish. I live down the street. They said, well, what are you running for? I said, no, I'm not running. They said, yes, you are. They grabbed my wrist and they took me to the front of the room, and I met their leader. Her name is Linda Ambrose. We are still friends. And she said, Hey, what? You're an ER doc? You just showed up? I said, yeah, I just want to get involved and see what I can do. And she said, you need to meet this guy. His name was Eric Meyer. He was, at the time, the House Minority Leader. 2 weeks later, I was having coffee with this guy. And I said, wow, that was easy. He was also a vegetarian. So a vegetarian ER doc I was sitting here having coffee with, and he's like, no, come with me and I'll show you what to do. Go knock some doors. I said, fine. So I volunteered with them a little bit, and then they got me into a fellowship. And when I did this little fellowship, they said, you are one of the ones that we think can do really well. You should really run. So I ran for office that year. And I'll tell you, there was one other thing that kind of made this story a little more, I guess I should say, kind of pushed me into this a little bit. And that was, it was my grandfather's 90th birthday was being celebrated in Mumbai. And this was about 7 years ago. And we went there, and I had a chance to visit the Sabarmati ashram while I was there. So now it's a museum. And I'm sure everybody if this is a Jain podcast, people know that Gandhi's philosophies were rooted in Jainism, right? And during that visit to the museum, you can almost hear his words whispering to you, right? He said that the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. And I think that also had some meaning for me. I said, life has to be more than just making money or doing just kind of getting through your day. And I think that really appealed to me as a mission and a calling. And given that I'd set up my life well enough for myself, I think it was like sort of all the right time. So that was kind of the milieu with which I entered public service. Long answer to your very short question.
No, it's really great. So thank you for walking us through that. So what are like some things that you found surprising as you delved into politics? Because I know a lot of times you have a perception of something, but when you're actually doing it, you realize that, wow, my thinking was way off. So is there anything that you'd be open to share about that experience?
Yeah, it's tough, right? Like we know that politics itself as a human endeavor has not exactly been inspiring in this country, many places. So the whole experience has been educational for me. Throughout it, I've tried to maintain my Jain sense of values. I think integrity is very important to us. We all know there are some really big, important principles that we walk around with, but that we were taught. So I grew up in the Jain Temple of Chicago, and I don't know, I spent more of my time playing football in the parking lot with the other boys rather than going inside and really going and learning, or attending the Giboli or the bhajans or whatever it is. I was, but I remember actually going to more of the YJA and the YJP and these at the Jaina conventions. The seminars and the things that I learned there was really where I learned about Jainism more so in terms of how it applied to my life and what I wanted to get out of it. So these big principles are part of the way I've approached all of this. One is nonviolence, right? Of course, ahimsa. We talk about nonviolence in terms of word and deed and thought. So you're in a sphere where people are there's arrows flying all over the place and people are attacking one another. Not exactly a Jain way to be, right? And at some point made a decision not to participate in that kind of behavior, right? I've never in all these years and 7 years of politics, really no personal attacks, not trying to vilify others. I happen to be a Democrat. I work really well with the Republicans down there, and that I approach them trying to understand their experiences, which leads to Jain value number 2, which is called Anikantvad, which we all know is appreciation of multiplicity of viewpoints. Walking into a situation and saying, I'm right, you're wrong, it isn't going to get you to a place where you can build a decent relationship with someone else, right? So one of the biggest things I talk about is to people who want to be successful in politics, follow Anikantvad, right? Understand that somebody might not necessarily share your beliefs, share your worldview, and maybe there's a reason for that, and maybe you can spend some time listening. There's a famous TV show called Ted Lasso, and he says curiosity, not judgment. Yeah, I think that's another way of saying this same kind of thing.
Got it.
So these things, informed a lot of the way that I thought about it, and then finally, aparigra, not materialism, right? And what we talk about our non-possessiveness. Politics is a lot of times, we have a lot of let's just say other considerations in politics that unfortunately cloud people's thinking, is what I'm going to say. Never let that become. I've clearly given up a lot of personal income to do this. I proudly make $24,000 a year in the Arizona House of Representatives. I make a little money on the side with my medical practice, which I still practice one day a week. But you're certainly not going to become rich doing this. But that's not the point. The point is to serve. The point is to be of service to humanity. And I think, like I said, this has been the philosophy with which I really approached politics, and it's yielded so many results. So I have passed. I have an all Republican legislature here. And when I first went in, people said, "You can't get anything done. You're in the minority." And I said, "We'll just see about that." So over the last 5 years, I've passed more bills through an all Republican legislature than any member of my party in over a decade. And
Wow.
these are not like license plate bills. These are bills that made a meaningful difference in people's lives. There was a human rights bill in there. There's animal protection. Unfortunately, a few of the animal bills that I sponsored that are really important didn't make it through, but I'm still pushing those things forward. A lot of them to help patients and in the healthcare realm. So it's not just about getting into office, and when you get into office, you do get power. What are you going to do with that power? Are you going to let it get to your head and make it about your own ego, or are you going to use that to try to serve as you said you would? And I think once you get into it with this kind of a mindset, you can be the work you do is very fruitful.
Absolutely. And thanks so much for sharing that, Amish. Just wondering, being a person of color obviously is not easy, especially when you're in politics. How you dealt with those situations where it was you're the only person in the room, person of color. So how have you dealt with those situations?
It's about giving people the chance to share their experience, and then it's like magic. It's like clockwork. They will ask you about yours, and they're curious about you. And that's I found that to be the best way. I'm more start with kindness and start with giving, and ask about people and be genuine in your caring and your curiousness about them. And they're going to ask. They're going to say, "Well, what about you? Tell me a little bit of who you are, what you believe in, why, all this kind of stuff." And I really mean it. Most people are just very, very kind. So that's been good. I am the first ever Indian elected to the Arizona legislature. So that is really great. Wow. And so there was never been an Indian elected in Arizona other than me. There was except for one guy was a small town mayor. He was Sikh, but other than that, I'm the first one, and I'm proud to report I'm not the last one. There's a guy named Amish Shah who I grew up with in the Jain Temple in Chicago, who is now elected to the Tucson School Board. And he's a great guy, and we're still friends. And he's a wonderful individual. And then after that, we have now another Indian American elected to the state Senate, and she's been wonderful to work with too. So we're growing in ranks. I think for my part, it's interesting. You're often asked about things that happen within the Indian community or Asian community, and to some degree, you have to serve as a representative of that community, because that burden falls on you if nobody else is in there or you're the first one. So, I consider it an honor and an opportunity to try to represent people well. That's all you can do. I've spent over the last 5 years time going to many of our Indian community function events, such as like we have Hindu temples here, and there are many of them. Of course, we have a Jain temple that I go to, but other than the Jain temple, I'm also trying to go to. We have a Baptist temple, and try to make your presence felt in the community, because they truly appreciate that. They're saying, "Wow, you're in this world, and you're there representing us," and we just really appreciate the opportunity to have somebody who can be that connection for us into the wider world.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned earlier that you still operate the practice 1 day a week, right?
Mhm.
How is like that context shifting? Because like I'm sure there's a lot of juggling there. Because like you could be thinking about politics while you're on the 1 day a week at the medical practice, and then you could be thinking about the medical practice when you're doing your stuff with House of Representatives, and now potentially with Congress. It's like, how do you switch between contexts so quickly? Do you have any advice for that, or any stories?
I don't know what to say. I've been practicing medicine for a really long time, and I really enjoy it. So I go in there, and it's a little bit of a break from politics for me. I get to go there, just focus on patients and science and making people well, and that's a great thing, right? It really connecting with people in a very different way, and just kind of navigating their journey through the medical system. So I enjoy it a lot. Some of this is very similar, though, right? Because as part of my campaigning over the last 5 years, the thing that I've done differently is that I have personally knocked on more than 16,000 doors, right?
Oh, wow.
That's how I won every single race I was in, as resoundingly as the top vote getter in competitive primaries, which is, I said, I'm not just going to throw marketing material at people. I'm going to come knock on their door and shake their hand. Let that be a lesson to anybody who is listening to this and wants to one day think about running for office. The absolute best thing you can do is go knock on door after door after door of your constituents, introduce yourself, shake your hand, and get to know, tell them what you believe in, ask them what they want to see in society, and they will vote for you because you made the effort to show up and earnestly ask how you could be of service to them, right? So I as you can imagine, knocking on 16,000 some doors, you meet quite a lot of different people. Well, it's actually not that different from the ER, where every single room you walk into is a stranger who's coming from a very different walk of life. So you're just constantly meeting people, and through your medical practice, typically in the ER, you meet about 2,000, 2,500 people a year, right? Not that different from going out there and talking.
16,000 is a lot. So like, what was like the cadence of how many doors per day you were looking at? Like 100, 200? Like 16,000 is a lot.
Typically, what I did during my first campaign, I cut the practice back to 1 day a week, and I had 1 day off per week. So about 5 days a week, I would start and get out there at about 10 o'clock, and I would go until sunset. And that would mean around 30 to 40 doors a day. And and then multiply that forward for 18 months, and we got to 8,034 doors. And that was my
wow. So it's 8 months of that. Okay, that makes sense. I was gonna say, it's like, how many days can you do? I mean, how many doors can you do in a day?
It's 18.
Yeah,
18 months.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's a lot.
And our summers here in Phoenix are not easy. And so what I did, what I became known for a little bit, was that it was frequently it's 120, right, during June or July. And so what I did was I actually purchased on Amazon, there's an ice vest that you can buy that goes underneath your shirt. And it has this material. You put it in the freezer, it freezes overnight. And what I would do is I had 2 of these, and I would put one in a cooler, right? And one I would start out with. So I'd go out and knock doors for 3 hours. Then I'd go have lunch, go to a restaurant. I'd swap it for the other one that was in the cooler, and then keep going for another 3 hours. So 6 hours I had a cooling vest. It really was this, like, it was basically ice strapped to my chest. So I became known for this because people said, first thing they'd look at me and they said, "Do you work out?" And I said, "Not really." And then they said, "Are you wearing a bulletproof vest because you're afraid?" And I said, "No, that's not actually it either." So I became known for this in Arizona as the guy who knocks incredible number of doors to get to know his constituents, as well as doing it in 120-degree heat. I mean, it's true. I almost passed out several times, got heat stroke, the whole thing. It's not. Sometimes I can take things a little far, as you can probably tell. But that's what it takes to win, and that's what it takes to do public service in a meaningful way for people. So that was the story of how I got elected. But it's it's a lot of journey. You asked a question. I think we got a little off tangent. But
no, I think you answered it. What I was asking is like, how many doors per day were we looking at to hit 16,000? And
no, it's about 30,
that's an impressive
40
number. 40 to 60 a day. That's an impressive number.
It depends. Yeah, I mean, my highest would be around 50 or 60 per day. Lowest, around 15 to 20. It depends on the day. The more people that answer the door, the slower you're going to be, right? The conversations will go on depending. But I mean, to be really honest, I just came from knocking doors just now. I still knock almost every day. So.
Wow.
Yeah. So what's the purpose of knocking today? Is it just to get the sense of changing perceptions over time so you can implement that in policy making, or what's the drive to like continue to knock?
I'm running for Congress, so I'm running for a much bigger area than my legislative district, right? So my legislative district encompasses about 250,000 people. My congressional district is 750,000 people. So
okay, wow, got it.
So we are out there knocking on doors of people who've never met me before.
Could you share us some interesting experiences about knocking on these doors? Right? Some people obviously are more receptive than the others. I'm sure you got a door shut on your face a few times. how did you deal with those situations?
I mean, I'd like to quote famous philosopher who said, "Shake it off, shake it off." That was Taylor Swift who said that, right? And just try to move. I mean, sometimes, I think like 2.3% of people will slam the door in your face, right? That's the way it goes. Maybe they're having a bad day. I don't know. But try to focus on the fact that, about some 40 to 50% of people that I met are just warm and welcoming and nice. And, by the way, the other 50% aren't home. So there's that. 50% aren't home. 2.3% will slam the door in your face. But some 40% of people are just genuinely excited to meet you and say hello and will say thank you. Like, thank you for coming by and asking me for my vote and for being somebody who is interested in getting to know me so that you can represent me. So overwhelmingly, it's gratitude, right? So that helps a lot. Again, the other thing is you meet people of all different kinds, Democrats, Independents, Republicans, and they have very different views. And can you be okay with that? Can you be okay with the idea of listening to them and trying to understand? I also, you don't want to ever mislead anybody and tell them something that you don't believe in, right? Or pander to people. That's not my way either. So when you disagree, you have to be straight and upfront and say, I appreciate your perspective. That's not how I feel about it. This is how I feel about it. So I don't ever do that. Is give people the sense that you agree with them, or I guess just sort of mislead. I think that's the word I'm looking for. You never want to mislead anybody into thinking that you're in agreement with them, or you feel a certain way when you feel another way. It's better to be very, very upfront.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense.
So now, since you're going from 250,000 people to 750,000, it's almost 3x increase. So what are some of the strategies that you're using to scale up the operation that you have going on here? And I meant that as a pun, but really, like, what are your new strategies to really focus on the people you've never met? Obviously, knock on door is one, but you have limited time. So how are you dealing with all of those situations?
No, that's a very prescient question, right? Like it is exactly the problem. You may not be able to reach everybody's door. In my prior races, that was the goal, to hit every precinct and try to get to every precinct and make sure to hit those target doors in all. It becomes more difficult. But there are other ways and different ways of reaching those people with more of a personal touch, and that's what we kind of do. So I actually have now surrogates that know me and understand my positions thoroughly and well, and those people can represent me, and we give them more of the opportunity to actually interact. So it has to, once again, has to be authentic, right? It has to be somebody who isn't just someone you just met, who is going out there and being your representative, and then give people the best possible chance to get in touch with you by putting out material that is truthful and is also invites a conversation. Unfortunately, what you also see sometimes in politics is some information which is hyperbolic, which I don't do. I try to stay very even keel and sober about it, right? Yeah. How many political email messages do you get that says the sky is falling, donate now or else? I mean, that it's not my style, right? So it's rather, here's who I am, here's what I'm doing. I invite you to reach out. Please contact us. We'd love to talk to you. That kind of thing. So and I think for many people, the authenticity of the message does start to reach their ears, and they say this person's genuinely interested in a conversation.
Yeah, I actually like a bunch of things that you said, right? Because it seems like the platform of your success is rooted in the idea of scaling the unscalable. And what I mean by that is knocking on 16,000 doors. That's no joke. That's, in many people's perception, that's like something you can't really scale, but you did it. And the way you did it is by just through sheer hard work, sheer sweat and tears, basically. So I think that's commendable, because I think that for a lot of things, that you can have a great marketing message, you can have a great political message, you can have a great PR strategy, but I think what makes the world of difference is that small touch, that small personal touch, which is one thing you're able to achieve through scaling unscalable things. Yeah. So I mean, even from a digital perspective, it could be a personalized message where every message you send to someone, it's sharing something to show that you are paying attention to what they're saying. That's something you can't scale. It's like not something an AI can pick up or anything like that, right? It's unscalable types of things. But then it sounds like your entire platform was based off of that idea. It's scaling the unscalable. And I think that's a testament to your success. It's putting in that work to make something like that possible.
Yeah, because these are real people. The thing that I also noticed, to one of your prior questions was, what have you learned from this? Well, you learn that politicians are disconnected. They're not actually. So if you continue to do this kind of thing where you're constantly going door to door every day, you're never going to become disconnected, because you're constantly listening to your community, and they're continuing to tell you, this is how I feel, this is how I feel, whether it's how they feel in reaction to the news. What are their values? Is anything seismically changing on the ground? Like, you'd be the first to know. But if all you did was listen to pollsters and insiders and lobbyists and other politicians, you get stuck in a bubble. And that's what happens. That's what happens. So people start to not be able to hear the messages that are actually coming through. And then people on in the voting base and the population, they feel that too. They say, oh, these politicians, they don't care, they don't listen. So,
oh yeah, I can totally see that. Because there's also a bit of bias that's incorporated whenever you do polls and things like that too, right? The way you worded the question can make a big difference, like using "and" in the wrong place or using the word "or," something like little like, I forget what the word is. I think it's double-barreled questions or whatever it's called. Like even small discrepancies in how you word things can influence how people poll. So I can totally see that. And like you're not going to be subject to the same types of biases if you're in person talking to someone and hearing it firsthand.
Right. And the sentiment, think about all the nonverbal communication, and think about the all of the other information that you're getting on how people feel about issues that doesn't just get captured in a simple poll question. That's real listening. That's listening with intent. And all that information, you're privileged to. I mean, they're sharing with you openly and honestly, because they want you to do something about it. And just trying to look at voters like manipulating them, saying, well, okay, well, they clearly care about this. If I manipulate my message and use these words, then more of them might, care about me. That, that's not really being of service to me.
Makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
So, Amish, moving forward, just curious to hear about the priorities once you kind of hopefully make it to the office, make it to the Congress.
Main planks of my platform have not changed in these years. There are many issues that I care about deeply. When you run, you get to talk about three, so you just have to pick three first. So
Right.
we can talk about all the others too, but I'll just tell you the three things that I highlight for people: healthcare, education, democracy. So on the healthcare front, I strongly believe that everybody needs to get covered. I've spent my life practicing medicine in a system where people are left out in the cold. They can't navigate the system, even if they have good insurance. Things are very expensive for them. This is very much a kitchen table issue. Imagine doing a lot of this when you're sick, adds more stress. And other countries do not do this to their citizens. So I do believe in universal health care where we can lower costs, right? We're the most expensive country on earth by like a factor of 2. Second, education. In Arizona, we are frequently ranked near the bottom in terms of education funding. So we don't pay our teachers very well here. Our classrooms are very poorly funded, and that needs to stop, and it needs to change. It's a very Arizona problem, but I stay focused on what people are telling me, and this matters to a huge number of people that are of both parties. And number 3, democracy. It should be easy to vote. We should encourage people to get out there and exercise their duty, their privilege, And I can't say enough that it should not be obstructed, right? The rights we've been given were hard earned, and I strongly believe in a vibrant, transparent democracy. So there are people who also have casted doubt on that, and that's also not acceptable because there's no evidence of fraud. So I think those things are very, very important to me. I also care very much about firearm-related violence as an ER doc, of course. Public safety is an issue for people here in Phoenix.
Mhm.
We've had trouble recruiting police officers. We are a border state, so immigration is of great concern to the voters here. We have a water crisis here in Arizona. The Colorado River isn't flowing nearly as well as it used to because of reduced ice pack due to climate change. And so we're having to deal with a lot less water here, and it's become a huge problem for the state of Arizona. We're in a desert, right? No surprise. So brought up climate change as well. So many of these things, right? Women's reproductive rights, which again, I believe in autonomy for women to be able to make those choices with doctors. A lot of these things really matter to the voters. So when I talk to people, I tell them what I believe in and why.
All right, and then what's been like your favorite policy that you've had the pleasure to work on thus far in your career in the House of Representatives?
I mean, I can talk to you about the bills that I've pushed forward that I'm extremely proud of. One was a human rights bill. We had a lady whose son was incarcerated. He had done some nonviolent crime. He'd stolen a little bit of electronics, and he got 6 years. He was serving his time, but it fortunately got sick during that time. She was not provided his medical records, couldn't advocate for him, was worried as a mother, and ended up he ended up getting cancer and passed away shortly after his release. That was really unacceptable because our Department of Corrections was truly not providing medical records for him so that she could advocate. So that bill was signed into law this year in 2023 by Governor Hobbs, and that was my bill, and I worked really hard to get that done on a bipartisan basis. I actually did a bill to reduce delays for all patients in Arizona by reforming what's called prior authorization. So if you need an MRI on your knee, your insurance company will require a prior authorization, and that whole process was a bureaucratic mess. We simplified it. Again, my bill got signed into law last year, a couple of years ago. Very proud of that. There was a bill, something that made me popular in the neighborhoods. There was a bill to stop fireworks after 11 o'clock. So we had fireworks going off all night in our neighborhoods, and the neighborhoods were just, people said they sounded like a war zone, and people were very upset. Can't go to work in the morning, dogs and cats frightened, fire department upset because it's very dry here and the embers can cause fires. Police getting called for these things. So had a huge group of stakeholders, worked very closely with one of our Republican members, and we came up with a compromise and got that curtailed to 11 p.m. So that made a difference in a lot of people's lives. Man, there's been quite a few, and so I'm very proud of a lot of the work that we did to move it forward. This year, my big priority was to expand our Medicaid system to provide preventive dental care to our population. So we're one of the few states that doesn't offer that. And just an ounce of prevention is a pound of cure. So it stops women from having preterm births. It stops cardiovascular disease later. And it's really, really inexpensive on the whole. $7.3 million was the price tag. Spread across the population of 2 million, it was like $3.50 per member per year. That's how cheap it was. But just that thing of preventive care stops so much bad stuff from happening later, meaning people coming to the emergency department with dental abscesses or root canals or severe pain. It would make a big difference. It didn't go this year, but hope to bring it back next year. And this is what I mean by tangible benefits for the people you serve.
Okay, yeah, those are great policy examples. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Get a chance to touch upon one of your other, I would like to call it an adventure, when you learned flying and you actually became a pilot. I forget if it was a small engine plane or something. Mm-hmm. And you actually, in between, I believe you used to fly around and treat patients. Do you want to share that experience a little bit for our audience here?
Yeah, I was working at Yuma, which is a small town on the border of California and Arizona and Mexico. And while I was there wasn't a whole lot to do. It's a border desert town, and there wasn't a whole lot to do at night. So I would be working ER shifts there. And then there was a guy who was teaching people how to fly. Great guy, Jim McDermott was his name, is his name. And he had these 4 Cessnas. And I called him up and I said, I want to learn. And so I go up there, and in 6 months, I got a pilot's license. And then it dawned on me that hospitals all over the state of Arizona were really in need of ER docs. So I thought, what a great business idea. I purchased a small airplane, and I still own it. And I would fly to all these various hospitals that would need you, especially in a pinch, right? So you're going out there, and they're like, I mean, they'll call you and say, I need somebody at 7 o'clock. Will you come? And sure. So make my way over there and get over. And yeah, it was fun. I that was my business model for many, many years.
Oh my God.
Once I started doing politics, though, I stayed a little more local here in Phoenix. So I didn't have as much time to fly around, but I still have my license. I still have the airplane, and still.
That's cool. It's basically, you're a concierge ER doctor, I guess. You fly to your
I call myself the emergency doctor. So when hospitals need you in emergency, because of course we're ER's 24/7, 365, they would call you. And so I would try to answer the call whenever I could.
Right. All right. So yeah, with that, I guess we can jump into the rapid fire, Amish. So okay, let me start with the easy one. Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
All right. What is your favorite virtue in others?
My favorite virtue in others? Humility.
What's your biggest pet peeve? Curious about this one because you meet so many people.
I don't Right. You see, you're saying pet peeve, so it's got to be something that kind of annoys you more than it bothers you at a more deep level. I mean, I would have said unkindness is probably one of my. I don't like it when people are unkind to each other, to animals. You know, I mean, this is I've been an animal lover my whole life. I can't stand it when people don't treat animals well. So I think some of that is probably, I'm just going to leave it there. I think unkindness is probably one of the things that irritates me the most. People should strive to be kind to each other.
Makes sense. What's your favorite comfort food?
Dosa, Italy dosa. I think I mentioned my dad was from Kerala, right? And so ever since we were little, South Indian food has been like my favorite thing. And so I love dosa, uttapam, Italy, vada, all that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Favorite dessert?
Favorite dessert, huh? That's an interesting one. You know, I went vegan about 8 years ago, so I've been little more, you know, conscious about what I eat, because I used to love sweet food and junk food and this and that. But many of the vegan restaurants here now in Phoenix, I mean, there's quite a lot too. They make just incredible desserts. So there's a local restaurant down the street here makes an incredible vegan chocolate cake. But I'll give one particular shout out to. Do you guys know that brand called Soy Delicious? It is found in many grocery stores. They make salted caramel vegan ice cream, which is just incredible. If you haven't had it, you got to try it.
Got it. Yeah, I know that one. Yeah, I love that as well. A different flavor though, but that's personal preference, I guess. Okay. What's your secret superpower?
My secret superpower? I don't know. I that's a really great one. People tell me a lot that I have a lot of energy, that I'm sort of a little, I don't know, I can be a little hyper sometimes. Like, they're like, how do you work so much? And I told them I think it's because I'm vegan, and so you know, I'm not kidding. I mean, I think ever since like about 7-8 years ago, when I decided to go vegan, just compared to, you know, I was like vegetarian, but then for life, but you know, junk food and this and that kind of thing. But I used to get tired, and I used to have a little more I don't know, just you know, feeling down and stuff. I tell you, since I went vegan, I feel great. Like I feel like I have way more energy, and I'm more excited and enthusiastic about everything. So not that I don't get tired. I'm just saying I just feel like people always tell me you're always on the go. You're always working so hard. How do you work so hard? So
yeah, I've heard that a lot of from people that have made that switch. I think part of it is less inflammation in the body, right? Because a lot of products, animal products, specific like milk and stuff, it does cause inflammation in the body. So that could be part of it. And plus, you're eating clean, right? You're not eating any junk food and processed food, so that probably helps a lot too.
I wish I could say that was perfectly true. I do still. I mean, look, like Oreos are vegan. I think you know this, right? And Coca-Cola. Yeah. I'm not telling anybody to go eat this, but occasionally I'll have an Oreo, right? Like this kind of thing. So I don't know. I feel like I'm telling you these things, and I'm like, wonder if that's really a superpower. But so I mean, you know, that's what I say. I'd say I have a lot of energy. People always tell me that. That's what they remark on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Just going off of that, morning person or night owl?
I'm naturally a night owl. I'm not a morning person. I don't like getting up early, but I've learned to do it.
I see.
Because, you know, it's necessary. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Last question in the series. So, what's a superpower you wish you had? And this one can be unrealistic.
That's an interesting one. You know, there's so many to choose from. I think. I mean, I remember once Barack Obama actually was asked this exact question, and he said he would like. He thought about the idea of being able to speak anybody's language, any language on earth instantly. So you could be a translator for everybody and really understand. So I really like that answer, but I feel like now I'm stealing his answer, right?
We've had this before. One from
Yeah.
a travel blogger couple. Yeah, they said, "Hey, we want a superpower. We just shake somebody's hand. We learn their language." So that way,
Huh.
that's the superpower. They actually, I take it back. This is the last one.
Hmm.
Who's the politician that you look up most to?
Oh,
That's a good
so
question.
I think Obama was one of the ones that I look to the most, because I mean, there's a lot to relate to for somebody like me, right? He was
Right.
a consummate professional. He was extremely thoughtful. Not everybody liked him. I understand that. But I felt that he always acted like a gentleman. I saw him in the way that he would interact with even the Republicans, and how he had a friendship with John Boehner, if you remember, right? And he was always willing to listen to what other people had to say intently, and then tell people what he thought, and would be thoughtful in his responses. I found him not to be hyperbolic. He wasn't full of bluster. I thought he was a gentleman. So those are great quality. I thought he actually had humility. I remember this one time. Anyways, it's interesting. He there's war that happened. I mean, war is a terrible thing. He, as Jain people, of course, we abhor all kinds of violence. I remember this one time he actually talked about how, there were these drone attacks that we were doing in the Middle East, and he said that it's a really unfortunate thing that has to happen, but it saves more lives than it will cost, and somebody has to ultimately go to sleep at night and take some moral responsibility for very, very difficult decisions, and that has to be me, and it has to fall on my shoulders. That cannot be an easy thing. And I just remember that, thinking to myself, at least somebody is conscientiously thinking very carefully about these actions that are horrible on face, and saying to themselves, it's a hard thing for the greater good. So I mean, I remember same thing. Obama was talking about how he decided not to go to war in Syria. If you may remember this as well. And he thought very carefully about it, because they were using chemical weapons against innocent people, right? So these are weighty questions that I'd hope that we would have to, if nothing else, struggle with before we have to make decisions. And unfortunately, you have to make decisions when you're the person in charge. So
thank you so much for the discussion here. We're actually coming to a close. I can't believe it's already close to an hour since we started. The hour flew by so quickly. We're just so engrossed in this conversation with you. But before we close, would you like to share a recommendation for our listeners? And a recommendation for a reference could be a piece of media, like kind of a book, a movie, podcast, or anything, or it could be a general advice as well, or anything that stuck. Really up to you.
Quote my favorite philosopher one more time, and I can say, if you say it in the street, it's a knockout. If you say it in a tweet, that's a cop out. That's what she said. Also Taylor Swift, right? And I mean it. Don't get on Twitter and be mean to people. Just being mean to people. So by the way, being Jain doesn't mean like I can be mean on Twitter. No, you can't do that either, right? Or leader and an example for other people. Don't do that on social media, just like you wouldn't, because there's a person on the other end of that, right? So 100%. I would say engage with your politicians, engage with people in charge, engage with the world, person to person, in earnest, and life will end up being a success for you. I don't know. I just my example is, whatever. Not. I'm not talking like, in your career and finance and all that stuff. I'm talking more like just joy for your soul, right? Go out there and earnestly interact with your fellow person, your fellow man and woman, and learn, right? Like what they have to teach you, and share the world with them in peace. Those things are super important. I don't, as far as like also getting through some tough times. There's an author by the name of Brene Brown. I don't know if you've ever heard of her. She's fantastic.
Right. Yep.
It's great advice for just clearing the distractions and just plodding on in a good way, right? I think these are some of the best advice I've gotten, is reading some of these authors and listening to the best wisdom that people have to offer.
Yep,
Awesome.
absolutely. Well, Amish, it was an absolute pleasure hearing your story and learning about some of your multitude of different experiences across different areas of life, business, etc., politics, etc. Do you have any questions for us as we close?
No, I just want to say thank you to both of you guys for hosting this podcast. I hope that my journey here can serve as an inspiration for more people in our community to step up into a position of leadership. I mean it. At the YJP event at the JANA convention, that's what I loved the most, is that I saw so many sparks in people's eyes, like just sort of opening of a possibility that Janes can do this. Yeah. And there has never been a Jane in Congress before. So here I am, and I'm trying to do it. I hope I get there. If I get there, I hope I'm not the last one. I hope that, when I am a congressman, I show up to all of our events and community things, and people can see, and that will give all of the other people that come after me a someone to talk to, and a place to learn, and an avenue to kind of grow and follow in this way. And then if let's say I don't, then I will still help anybody in our community by sharing my experiences of everything I've learned in this entire world, how to navigate through politics while still being a conscientious Jane person, and hopefully help them, become wildly successful the way they want.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, Amish, thank you so much, and it was an absolute pleasure speaking with you. We hope this was an enjoyable experience for you, and hopefully we will be able to talk to you again pretty soon.
Certainly.
And
thank you,
and all the best for your.
I appreciate it, you guys. Thank you so much.
Right, and all the best to you for the elections. So
thank you.
All right.